For more than 2 centuries, the Uinta Basin of northeastern Utah has existed as a kind of geographical puzzle, a quiet, sun-baked expanse of red rock and sagebrush where the standard laws of nature seem to bend, twist, and occasionally break entirely. Long before high-tech research teams set up perimeter fences and motion-tracking camera arrays, indigenous Ute tribes marked the 512-acre property known as Skinwalker Ranch as off-limits. They spoke of a shifting, intelligent presence that dwelt beneath the shadows of the massive sandstone mesa, an entity that could manifest as phantom lights, alter local weather patterns, or simply dissolve into the night air without leaving a footprint. When modern science finally arrived on the property, the initial strategy was straightforward. Bring in the most sophisticated sensor suites available, map the environment, and identify the natural mechanism driving the folklore. Over years of systematic field testing, astrophysicist Dr. Travis Taylor, chief scientist Erik Bard, and property owner Brandon Fugal deployed everything from military-grade thermal imaging and high-speed optical tracking to multi-spectrum radio frequency analyzers. Time and again, their instruments locked onto the same perplexing signatures. Unidentified aerial phenomena moved across the valley at hypersonic speeds without producing sonic booms. Local gravity readings fluctuated erratically near the center of the property. Most mysteriously, a pristine, high-amplitude digital radio signal broadcast at precisely 1.6 GHz, a frequency standardly reserved for satellite telecommunications and military defense tracking, repeatedly pierced the air. Whenever the team initiated high-energy field tests, for a long time the consensus was that these phenomena were originating from the sky. Transient atmospheric disturbances or craft descending from above to interact with the valley floor. It was a reasonable hypothesis, but it missed the fundamental origin of the anomaly. The real driver of these events was not sweeping down from space. It was waiting, perfectly preserved and completely hidden, directly beneath the boots of the scientific team. The shift in perspective came during a series of advanced geophysical surveys aimed at mapping the internal structure of the mesa, the dominant sandstone cliff that towers over the eastern boundary of the ranch. Previous attempts to drill core samples into the mesa had met with bizarre, near-impossible obstacles, diamond-tipped drill bits grinding to a halt on impenetrable material, sudden equipment power failures, and localized temperature drops that defied the desert heat. When the team deployed deep penetrating seismic arrays and high-density ground radar sweeps along the base of the ridge, the data returned an image that halted all discussion inside the command center. Embedded hundreds of feet inside the natural sandstone strata was a massive structural anomaly, a continuous, highly dense void with engineered geometric contours that could not be explained by millions of years of natural water erosion or tectonic faulting. The scans revealed a smooth, vault-like corridor leading straight toward a massive, curved object embedded at the core of the mountain. The implication was staggering. The 1.6 GHz broadcasts, the gravitational warps, and the aerial phenomena were not separate, random occurrences. They were the external emissions of a complex high-energy system operating out of sight, locked inside the rock face itself. As heavy earth-moving equipment was brought into position along the base of the mesa to clear away centuries of fallen sandstone rubble, a palpable tension settled over the ranch. The team was no longer just monitoring the skies from a safe distance. They were about to breach the stone casing of an ancient subterranean secret. And the moment the excavator's teeth pulled back the final layer of crushed rock to expose a dark, engineered opening, every sensor in the command center exploded with activity, signaling that whatever was inside the mountain had just realized it was no longer alone. The baseline spectrum monitors inside the command center didn't just register activity, they pegged out at absolute peak capacity. The 1.6 GHz radio carrier wave, which had historically manifested as a faint elusive burst in the upper atmosphere, was now gushing directly out of the newly exposed breach at the base of the mesa. It wasn't an atmospheric reflection or a distant satellite signal bouncing off the canyon walls. It was a localized, high-throughput transmission originating from within the mountain itself, pulsing at a constant amplitude that flooded every receiver across the 512-acre property. Outside, at the edge of the excavation zone, the physical environment turned violently unpredictable. As the dust settled around the newly cleared opening, a dense, frigid draft began to pour out of the dark void, cascading down the sandstone slope like invisible water. Handheld thermal imaging units operated by Dr. Travis Taylor recorded the temperature at the mouth of the breach, plummeting from 32 degrees Celsius down to below freezing in a matter of seconds. Yet there was no ice, no visible vapor, and no draft of wind moving the surrounding desert brush. The heat energy of the immediate area was simply vanishing, drawn inward toward the dark throat of the mesa as if consumed by a massive thermodynamic sink. Chief Scientist Erik Bard immediately ordered a total freeze on human entry into the passage. Standard scientific protocol demanded a comprehensive environmental hazard assessment before any researcher set foot inside. The air venting from the breach was heavily ionized, carrying an intense, metallic odor of ozone so concentrated it stung the eyes and rasped in the back of the throat, an unmistakable signature of sustained high-voltage electrostatic discharge. To safely probe the subterranean structure without risking human life, the team readied a specialized treaded micro-rover. Engineered for extreme hazardous terrain, the vehicle was equipped with ultra-high-definition optical cameras, LiDAR 3D mapping sensors, multispectrum radiation detectors, and a hardened fiber optic umbilical line, designed to maintain a hardwired data connection through dense rock and intense electromagnetic interference. As the micro-rover's heavy rubber treads gripped the floor of the passage and rolled past the sunlight into the gloom, its high-intensity LED array illuminated a view that brought conversations inside the command center to a sudden halt. The tunnel was not a jagged natural cave or an eroded fault crack. The walls formed a uniform, perfectly vaulted arch roughly 9 feet high and 10 feet wide, extending straight into the sandstone bedrock along a flawless linear trajectory. But it was the surface texture of the stone that shocked the team. The standard, coarse red sandstone of the Uinta Basin had been transformed. The inner perimeter of the passage was smooth, dark, and glossy, covered in a continuous, vitrified glaze where the natural quartz grains of the sandstone had been instantaneously melted and fused into a seamless, ceramic-like liner. Whatever had created this tunnel had not dug or blasted its way through the mountain. It had bored through solid bedrock using immense directed thermal energy or focused acoustic forces, vaporizing the rock face and sealing the surrounding stone in a single, high-energy pass. As the micro-rover pushed deeper into the vitrified corridor, logging distance along its tether, the onboard LiDAR mappers began building a real-time point cloud model on the command center screens. The tunnel maintained its precise geometry for nearly 200 feet before coming to an abrupt, sudden end. There, blocking the passage entirely, sat a massive curved metallic barrier, a seamless bulkhead embedded directly into the melted sandstone walls. Under the rover's bright halogen lights, the composite material of the barrier absorbed light in an irregular, non-linear pattern, revealing a dark, non-reflective hull that showed zero rust, oxidation, or structural stress despite the millions of tons of sandstone pressing down from above. The visual image of that seamless dark bulkhead frozen on the primary monitors created a chilling silence inside the command center. For years, skeptics had argued that the erratic magnetic readouts and thermal spikes recorded around the Mesa were nothing more than anomalous mineral deposits or natural piezoresistive effects caused by shifting sandstone strata. But standing face-to-face with an engineered, non-reflective metallic barrier embedded deep within the rock face completely erased those conventional explanations. Dr. Travis Taylor zoomed in on the live optical stream from the micro-rover, scrutinizing the texture of the barrier. The composite material did not match industrial alloys like carbon steel, structural aluminum, or commercial titanium. Under the rover's high-intensity halogen lighting, the surface exhibited a faint iridescent sheen, shifting subtly between dark indigo and slate gray depending on the angle of illumination. There were no visible welds, rivets, stress fractures, or mechanical fasteners along the entire exposed arc of the bulkhead. The wall was completely seamless, looking less like a assembled structural panel and more like a single, continuous piece of composite material grown or cast directly inside the heart of the mountain. Determined to collect hard physical data on the composition of the barrier, Erik Bard prepared to activate the micro-rover's laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, ELIBIBE unit, a precision instrument designed to fire short, high-energy laser pulses at a target surface to vaporize microscopic particles and identify elemental composition through atomic emission spectra. The operator carefully steered the rover to within 3 inches of the metallic bulkhead, aligned the optical probe, and fired the laser pulse. The reaction was instant, violent, and completely unexpected. The moment the focused photon beam struck the metallic hull, the surface did not pit, vaporize, or scorch. Instead, the dark composite material absorbed the laser's thermal energy entirely, redistributing it across its outer skin in a brilliant liquid wave of pale blue luminescence. Simultaneously, a high-voltage electrostatic discharge arced directly from the face of the bulkhead onto the micro-rover's metallic chassis. The shock traveled backward along the fiber optic tether, causing primary circuit breakers inside the command trailer to blow out in a shower of sparks. Across the entire 512-acre property, every field sensor went wild. The baseline 1.6 GHz radio broadcast didn't just spike in power, it shifted its fundamental modulation pattern. The wideband signal analyzers revealed that the clean carrier wave had instantly split into structured, high-speed data packets that escalated in direct proportion to the external laser energy applied to the barrier. The machine inside the Mesa was not an inert, forgotten relic of history. It was an active, energy-responsive system that monitored its own structural hull and reacted dynamically to external diagnostic probing. Recognizing that remote rovers could only reveal a fraction of the truth, Dr. Travis Taylor, Chief Scientist Erik Bard, and Superintendent Thomas Winterton suited up in static-shielded, insulated hazardous environment suits. Equipped with portable magnetometers, non-contact thermal cameras, and high-frequency acoustic sensors, the three researchers stepped out into the desert heat and entered the dark, vitrified mouth of the Mesa tunnel on foot. As their boots crunched across the glassy, ceramic-glazed floor, the acoustic properties of the passage proved unnervingly disorienting. Normal spoken words were swallowed almost instantly. The smooth, fused sandstone walls absorbed sound waves rather than reflecting them, creating a eerie, deadened silence that made even their own heartbeats sound unnaturally loud. Crossing the thermal boundary into the sub-zero zone near the 200-foot mark, the team stood directly before the towering metallic bulkhead. Dr. Taylor extended a handheld non-contact electromagnetic probe toward the dark hull. Before the sensor tip could even come within 2 inches of the barrier, a low, sub-audible vibration began to rumble through the soles of their boots, a deep, rhythmic mechanical hum vibrating at precisely 8.1 Hz. The 8.1 Hz frequency sat squarely within the extremely low-frequency spectrum, matching the fundamental resonant frequency of the Earth's ionosphere, known as the Schumann resonance. The craft or structure buried inside the Mesa was phase-locked with the natural electromagnetic heartbeat of the planet itself, using the surrounding sandstone and deep geological fault lines as a massive planet-wide grounding array. The realization that the metallic structure was phase-locked with the Earth's natural ionospheric resonance sent a cold wave of adrenaline through the three men standing in the darkness. Feeling that continuous 8.1 Hz vibration pulse directly through the soles of their heavy boots, the scientific team understood they were no longer dealing with a passive structural relic. They were standing inches away from a functional, planet-scale energy transducer that was actively adjusting its internal resonance to match the physical presence of three human beings. Dr. Travis Taylor held his handheld Gauss meter within inches of the bulkhead's dark, iridescent surface. The display screens flickered erratically before logging a localized magnetic field collapse. The magnetic readings around the barrier didn't just drop in intensity. They plummeted toward absolute zero Gauss, creating a localized magnetic void where standard magnetic lines of force were completely expelled from the perimeter of the hull. This total expulsion of magnetic flux was a textbook physical signature of superconductivity. The bulkhead was functioning as an exotic, room-temperature superconductor operating at zero resistance, allowing massive electrical currents to circulate through its metallic skin without generating thermal waste or losing power over time. To map the internal spatial dimensions of what lay directly behind this impenetrable superconducting bulkhead, the team outside the Mesa initiated a real-time cross-correlation using cosmic ray muon tomography panels deployed along the base of the ridge. Because subatomic muons pass easily through standard sandstone and soil but are scattered or absorbed by high-density metals and concentrated energy fields, incoming particle tracks allowed supercomputers in the command center to build a precise, three-dimensional shadow map of the subterranean vault. As the computational models rendered on primary monitors inside the nerve center, a jaw-dropping geometric structure materialized on screen. The vault sitting directly behind the bulkhead was a massive, symmetrical dome spanning over 120 feet in diameter. At the exact geometric center of this subterranean hall suspended a dense, perfectly spherical core measuring roughly 30 feet across. The muon tracks passing through the center of that core were completely deflected, creating a distinct, circular data shadow where standard subatomic particles simply could not penetrate. Physicist Dr. Travis Taylor examined the rendered particle trajectories with growing intensity. The complete, nonlinear scattering of high-energy cosmic muons indicated either an extraordinary material density far exceeding anything on the periodic table, or the presence of a localized gravitational well, zero-mass core capable of bending spacetime around the central sphere. While the data processed, the physical environment inside the tunnel began to respond to the continuous processing of the muon panels. The deep 8.1 Hz vibration vibrating through the vitrified sandstone floor shifted its pitch, harmonizing with the persistent 1.6 GHz radio carrier wave broadcasting overhead. On the wideband spectrum analyzers, the two distinct signals locked into a perfect mathematical ratio. Simultaneously, static electricity inside the passage surged to dangerous levels. Handheld electrometers carried by the field crew pegged out at maximum thresholds, logging an electrostatic potential on the surrounding rock face of over 35,000 volts per meter. Yet, despite the massive charge filling the air, there were no electrical shocks, no visible sparks, and no thermal heat generation. The energy was holding itself in a state of absolute high-density equilibrium within the narrow confines of the passage. Then, Superintendent Thomas Winterton noticed a bizarre optical anomaly occurring along the edges of the tunnel floor. Small particles of loose sandstone dust, Tiny quartz fragments and small metal shavings dropped during the rover deployment began to twitch. Slowly, defying the laws of standard Newtonian gravity, the dust particles lifted off the stone floor, floating silently in midair 2 to 3 inches above the ground. The structure inside the mesa was actively manipulating local spacetime geometry. The zero-mass core mapped by the muon tomography unit was generating a localized anti-gravitational field, a spatial warp bubble that neutralized gravitational force around the structure. The tunnel was no longer just an access corridor. It was an active energy conduit feeding directly into a machine capable of rewriting the laws of physics. The anti-gravitational levitation of loose sandstone fragments inside the vitrified passage sent an immediate wave of urgency back to the command center. The scientific team was no longer merely analyzing static physical properties. They were standing inside a localized spatial warp field that was actively expanding outward from the core of the mesa. Dr. Travis Taylor carefully pulled a small stainless steel diagnostic gauge from his vest pocket and held it loosely over the floor of the passage. The moment he released his grip, the tool did not fall to the stone floor. It suspended instantly in midair, swaying gently in the sub-zero draft as if submerged in a dense, invisible fluid before slowly drifting upward toward the smooth, glazed ceiling of the tunnel. Inside the command center, Chief Scientist Erik Bard tracked the spatial geometry of this expanding field on the primary telemetry displays. The localized gravitational collapse was not spreading randomly through the rock strata. It was propagating along a precise, linear vector that lined up perfectly with the subterranean fault lines running directly from the mesa toward the infamous triangle sector, the exact region of airspace 5,000 feet overhead, where researchers had recorded aerial anomalies for years. The machine embedded deep within the Uinta Basin was not an isolated artifact. It was functioning as a primary spatial anchor, an active zero-mass engine that linked the deep geology of the Earth directly to the energetic phenomena manifesting in the desert sky. Determined to measure the rate of energy transfer passing along this subterranean vector, Erik Bard deployed a series of hardened, fiber-optic ground dipole arrays directly into the stone floor of the tunnel. The moment the diagnostic leads were anchored into the vitrified rock, the spectrum analyzers inside the nerve center caught a massive multi-channel data stream pulsing through the Earth. The baseline 1.6 GHz radio signal, previously recorded as a single pristine digital carrier wave, split into 6 distinct, parallel subchannels. Each subchannel was locked to a specific high-frequency modulation pattern that pulsed in perfect synchronization with the 8.1 Hz ELF vibration humming through the mountain. When the real-time processing computers mapped the planetary directional vectors of these 6 subchannels, the results left the research team utterly speechless. The 6 parallel signals were not dispersing into the local desert crust, nor were they broadcasting into the upper atmosphere. They were traveling as tightly focused, non-attenuating electromagnetic waves through low-loss acoustic waveguides embedded deep in the Earth's mantle. One vector aligned precisely with the deep oceanic trench of the Bermuda Triangle in the North Atlantic. Another tracked straight along the volcanic fault lines of the Devil's Sea off the eastern coast of Japan. A third vector pointed directly toward the magnetic anomaly zones of the high-altitude Atacama Desert in South America. The underground installation beneath Skinwalker Ranch was a master relay station, a central operational hub in an interconnected, planet-wide energy grid concealed miles beneath the Earth's surface. As the computers finalized the planetary vector maps, the physical environment inside the tunnel underwent a sudden, terrifying shift. The pale frost clinging to the metallic bulkhead began to glow with a soft bioluminescent blue light. The semi-vitrified sandstone walls, subjected to the immense electromagnetic tension radiating from the inner core, converted the field strain into visible light through high-density piezoluminescence, painting the dark passage in an ethereal violet hue. The temperature inside the shaft plummeted even further, dropping past -20 degrees Celsius in a matter of seconds. Inside the command center, main circuit breakers groaned under an unexpected power backfeed coming from the grounded sensors inside the passage. The machine inside the mesa was no longer idling in a low-power standby state. The opening of the tunnel and the subsequent diagnostic laser tests had initiated an automated multi-node boot sequence, pulling raw geothermal energy straight out of the planet's core. The violent escalation of the core's automated boot sequence transformed the entire Uinta Basin into an active seismic and electromagnetic hazard. Outside the vitrified mouth of the tunnel, along the razor-sharp crest of the mesa, the ground began to vibrate with a high-frequency resonance. It wasn't the heavy, rolling rumble of a standard tectonic fault shift, but a sharp, rhythmic hum that made the massive sandstone cliff face sing like a giant tuning fork. Inside the command center, emergency sirens blared as power backfeeds from the subterranean fiber optic array blew out secondary surge protectors, filling the trailer with the acrid scent of scorched copper wire. Dr. Travis Taylor, Erik Bard, and Superintendent Thomas Winterton scrambled out of the freezing passage, retreating back across the rock debris field to the safety of the field office. As they turned back toward the mountain, the night sky over the ranch was illuminated by a terrifying optical spectacle. The throat of the newly opened passage was projecting a concentrated, column-like beam of pale violet light straight out of the Mesa face. The surrounding air, supercharged with high-density piezoluminescence and electrostatic energy, crackled with visible static threads that reached toward the valley floor. Inside the nerve center, hardened battery-backed monitors flickered back to life, displaying real-time telemetry from the cosmic ray muon tomography panels. The data streaming across the screens made the scientists freeze. The spatial warp bubble centered on the 30-foot zero-mass core had expanded exponentially. Its radius, initially confined to the inner vault, had expanded outward to over 400 feet, completely encompassing the central structure of the mesa. Within this expanding sphere of influence, standard gravitational force had completely broken down. Seismic sensors embedded deep inside the mountain recorded stone, soil, trapped groundwater, and air molecules behaving as if the mass of the mesa had dropped to zero. The massive metallic structure was effectively weightless, floating inside its own self-generated spatial pocket suspended within the crust of the Earth. At that exact moment, the optical tracking cameras trained on the airspace over the Triangle sector captured the atmospheric payoff of this subterranean power surge. The invisible boundary known as the bubble, floating 5,000 feet in the air, suddenly ignited into a brilliant swirling ring of ionization. The pale cyan plasma light that had flashed inside the borehole was now manifesting in the sky overhead, forming a perfectly symmetrical 200-foot wide portal. The 1.6 GHz radio signal had reached a staggering power output, creating a visible, column-like refraction axis in the air that connected the peak of the mesa directly to the glowing ring above the triangle. The 6 subterranean vectors connecting the ranch to anomaly zones across the globe, from the Bermuda Triangle to the Devil's Sea, were now firing in absolute synchronization. International geophysical monitoring stations along those exact geological fault lines simultaneously recorded synchronized, ultra-low-frequency magnetic spikes matching the exact 8.1 Hz rhythm pulsing out of Skinwalker Ranch. The master node beneath the basin was sending an activation command across the entire subterranean network. Inside the trailer, the scientific team faced an agonizing decision. Breaching the passage had initiated a chain reaction that was rapidly spiraling out of control. If the energy buildup continued at its current exponential rate, the localized anti-gravitational field threatened to tear the sandstone structure of the mesa apart from the inside out, exposing the massive craft and releasing its exotic plasma core directly into the open atmosphere. Dr. Taylor immediately directed the field team to deploy a high-voltage grounding array directly into the mouth of the tunnel. The plan was to fire a series of ultra-short, high-frequency electromagnetic dampening pulses down the hole, a counterphase interference signal designed to disrupt the 8.1 Hz ELF resonance and force the craft's internal power routing back into its low-energy standby state. As the generator coils hummed to life on the surface, and the counterpulse was injected straight into the dark stone shaft, the entire valley held its breath. The air grew impossibly dense with static, the violet beam flickered wildly, and for 5 agonizing seconds, the mountain seemed to stand on the absolute razor's edge between total energy release and complete collapse. Then, with a sudden deafening crack that sounded like a localized thunderclap echoing through the deep earth, the counterphase pulse found its mark. The column of violet light projecting from the throat of the passage collapsed inward, snapping back into the dark stone shaft like a severed wire. Overhead, the swirling cyan plasma ring floating 5,000 feet above the triangle sector dissolved into thin desert air, leaving behind only the quiet, cold expanse of the Utah night sky. Inside the command center, primary instrument displays flickered back to standard baseline levels. The thermal imaging feeds monitoring the metallic bulkhead showed the intense sub-zero temperature gradient stabilizing, locking back into a dormant, low-energy equilibrium. The floating sandstone fragments inside the passage dropped softly back to the glazed floor. The 1.6 GHz signal receded to its gentle, intermittent whisper, and the deep 8.1 Hz vibration settled back into a passive 4-second pulse. The machine beneath Skinwalker Ranch had retreated from the edge of activation, slipping quietly back into its ancient, hyper-vigilant sleep. The unsealing of the mesa's hidden tunnel marks a definitive line in the history of human scientific inquiry. What began generations ago as whispered tales of shifting lights, vanishing livestock, and strange voices in the dark has finally matured into an undeniable empirical reality. Skinwalker Ranch was never just a hotspot for transient atmospheric phenomena or random visitors passing through the night sky. The property is the surface anchor for an extraordinary, hyper-advanced subterranean installation, a self-sustaining, superconducting vessel equipped with a zero-point spatial engine, embedded deep within the Earth's crust and maintaining an active energy grid across the entire globe. Breaching that vitrified stone passage did more than just clear away centuries of fallen sandstone. It forever dismantled our scientific comfort zone. It forced us to confront a reality where gravity can be localized, where materials absorb laser light to alter their own mass, and where the most profound secrets of technology and space-time are not orbiting distant stars millions of light-years away, but waiting silently directly beneath our feet. Yet, as the pale golden light of dawn begins to creep over the high sandstone cliffs of the Uinta Basin, illuminating the vitrified entrance of the open tunnel, the scientific team stands at the threshold of a far deeper enigma. The discovery of the subterranean installation hasn't solved the mystery. It has amplified it. We now know what is inside the mountain, but the ultimate questions remain unanswered. Who built this global subterranean grid? How long has it been monitoring our planet? And what happens when the master node beneath Skinwalker Ranch fully awakens? If this deep, investigative journey into the unsealed Mesa tunnel expanded your perspective and challenged what you thought was possible, please hit the like button to support the channel. Subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss an update as this groundbreaking investigation continues to unfold. And now, we want to hear from you. What do you believe is the ultimate purpose of the zero-mass core hidden inside the Mesa? Is it an ancient planetary monitoring network, or something far beyond human comprehension? Drop your theories in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep searching for the truth and stay curious.